what you'll get for a good trade. And you'll absolutely love our non-commissioned sales team because they're paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. It's Ben and Chevy's best offer ever. New Chevys at $500 below the GM supplier employee price, plus you keep all the rebates. Together, let's drive at Bennett Chevrolet, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Home of the Philadelphia Eagles.
They got him again!
Sixers.
Bang! It's good! Ball game!
And Flyers.
Just in front of the net!
97.3 ESPN. WENJ. WENJ HD. Millville, Atlantic City. A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig.
It's good!
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
And he scored!
Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Josh Hennig.
Thursday edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers might be one of the final games of the season tonight. Sixers got a very important game tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN. The Masters are going on, and I got to tell you, I am shocked of the name at the top of the leaderboard. I'll tell you who that is in just a bit. Plus, the Eagles sign a tight end. What does that mean for Philadelphia? We'll get into all of that here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As always, you guys join the conversation at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. We're going to be coming up in less than 20 minutes because with this potentially being one of the last games of the Flyers season, the Flyers are on life support. Is there a chance they can go to the postseason? Very, very slim. A month ago, it felt like a fait accompli. A month ago, if you would have asked me who is the best team in Philadelphia, I thought it was the Flyers. They have gone from being a playoff team to being a team that can't win anything. By the way, your Masters update right now. Bryson DeChambeau is actually your leader at -7. Scotty Scheffler, he just missed a potential birdie putt to give him the tie from -7, but he came up just short. Also, former Masters champion Dustin Willett is at -4. So that is the main top of the leaderboard right now at the Masters. They started late today because of the weather that was passing through Georgia, all the thunderstorms. But I got to tell you guys really quick, I am shocked DeChambeau is the lead top of the leaderboard. And I hope you guys are not, nobody listening to the sound of my voice on 97.3 ESPN are the type of person who are easily manipulated to waste your money on gambling, because I just feel like what I saw Bryson DeChambeau hitting the golf ball today, I've never seen him play this well in my life. Never, never, never. I have never seen him be that clean, that consistent ever. So either he is going to have the weekend of a lifetime, or he's going to come back down to being who he's been, which is a talented golfer who has trouble being consistent. So we'll keep you updated on the Masters today and tomorrow here on 97.3 ESPN. I mentioned about the Eagles signing CJ Uzomah. The reason why I wanted to get to this is because I think this is another example of the Philadelphia Eagles falling in line with Kellen Moore. Hear me out for a moment, folks. CJ Uzomah is basically just a receiving tight end. He had a couple solid years with the Bengals. Then he hit free agency and he got the injury bug with the Jets, like half the team did last year, right? His production has, in the last 2 years, never even approached his final year with the Bengals, when he had an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow. When he had an average quarterback in Andy Dalton, he had 3 receiving touchdowns. When he had Joe Burrow, he had 5 receiving touchdowns. But what is he? He's a receiving tight end. He's not a blocking tight end. He's not an elite receiver. He is what he is. And why is that important to keep in mind? Because we have talked about numerous times here on 97.3 ESPN about who Kellen Moore is, what Kellen Moore brings to the table. And I keep going back to two comments that have been made in the last couple months. The first one was Jason Kelsey on the New Heights podcast. Because Jason, when he brought this up, it definitely made me raise my eyebrows because it was a comment that really made you think a lot about who and what this Eagles team is. Jason Kelsey on what Kellen Moore brings to the Philadelphia Eagles offensively.
He's done a little bit of everything. Obviously he comes from Boise, and it's
it was wacky back then, man. It was I
sure
want to say wacky. It was a different offense though, and they
did a lot of stuff. I mean, it was creative. That's what it comes down to. And I think there was a lot of people, even looking back ourselves, that realized that we could have potentially been a little bit more creative, I guess, offensively. And I think Kellen will bring a lot of that.
He talks about creativity. It's such an important part of this conversation because we all know that for the Philadelphia Eagles to be successful, for the Philadelphia Eagles to be better than they were last year, that there has to be a meeting of the minds when it comes to this offense. Kellen Moore has been brought in here to change this team. And then Nick Sirianni say this a few weeks ago about meshing Moore and his offenses together.
Always had respect from him from afar, and it's been fun to get to know him and work through these things together, to build our offense for next season. And so he's been highly successful, and we've been highly successful. And I think that, I'm really looking forward to meshing the things, meshing what he's done really well together with the things that we've done really well. Again, I think it's going to be a really good match, and Kellen's track record speaks for itself.
So part of meshing, right? Part of bringing Kellen Moore in here to make changes to this offense moving forward, I think has been directly reflected in the Eagles' decisions this offseason. Bringing a guy like Saquon Barkley is a distinct deviation from what the Eagles have done historically. In the past, every time the Eagles in the Howie Roseman years, every time they have brought a running back in here, it has not usually been a big name for big money. And the guys they've given big money to, Brian Westbrook and LaShawn McCoy, were guys that they drafted. Philadelphia Eagles have not brought in a big name running back for big money since Ricky Waters in the 1990s. Howie Roseman was still in college at that point. So you are looking at an organization that made a huge decision offensively. Well, if Kellen Moore is bringing in creativity and we're meshing Moore and Sirianni's ideas, and Sirianni knows that running the ball has been a big part of this team's success during his tenure, well, 1 + 1 = 2, right? And the same thing goes to bringing in, letting a guy like Quez Watkins go, letting a guy like Jack Stoll be picked up by the Jets. And you bring in a guy like CJ Uzama because this is a guy who can be a number 2 receiving tight end. This is a guy who can do the 2 tight end formation. You can go out there with 12 personnel. You can run an offense that you are not planning to lean on just one guy every down. And I think, again, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be a better football team next year. They're going to be a bit of a different looking football team next year. And it's going to be interesting because this roster is not done being made. The draft is coming up in a couple weeks. We know how Rose in the past has made trades in August to improve this roster. It's just another piece of a larger puzzle. And I'm looking forward to see what the final picture looks like when all the pieces are in place. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As promised, we'll get into the Flyers with Kevin Durso coming up in about 10 minutes from now, because this Flyers team is on life support. And I don't think it's good enough for me to just say, well, this team, they just ran out of gas. They're just not good enough. I feel like there has to be more to this, okay? And with this game tonight, the Flyers are obviously trying to press buttons to figure this out. Samuel Ersson has had a solid year, but he's obviously hit a rookie wall. They're putting Cam Atkinson and Igor Zamula back in the lineup. We're going to see how this all plays out. But there was one comment made by Jamie Drysdale today. Remember, Drysdale is new to the organization. Drysdale was brought in as part of the Cutter Gauthier fiasco, right? When the Flyers did not want a repeat of the J.D. Drew situation the Phillies went through in the late 90s. Jamie Drysdale, when he was asked at the Flyers and what's going on with them, this is the quote he gave to the media. Quote, "Every time we were on the ice, it felt like we got scored on, which was pretty much the case. It's pretty embarrassing, to be honest, but mistakes are always correctable. It's just a matter of how we respond now." Drysdale is painting everything that's happened. The embarrassing loss the other night to Montreal, the poor game in Buffalo and in Columbus. He is chalking this up to mistakes are always correctable, and about how do we respond to the mistakes that were made? How do we respond to an embarrassing situation? And he is painting it, Drysdale, like this is just, well, we can fix this. This is correctable. And I got to ask, what exactly are you correcting? Because a lot of the problems for this team, whether it was the Montreal embarrassing loss, whether it was the frustrating loss in Buffalo or the embarrassing loss in Columbus, these last three losses look like a team that is grossly outplayed, outgunned, outmaneuvered, outworked, out everything. And the fact that the head coach has not ripped his team for any of that is starting to feel a little bit similar to the Eagles' collapse at the end of their season. The Eagles, on paper, had the talent to be successful. The Eagles were 10-1 before they completely fell apart. And like the Eagles, there was a loss that triggered all of this. That loss, remember the Eagles, it was the 49ers. The 49ers loss sent them into a tailspin. I want to point to the first Montreal loss for what I think caused this tailspin. We'll ask Kevin Durso his thoughts, and it's coming up in a few minutes. The Flyers had just come off an overtime loss to the Rangers, a game that was a back and forth. They got to overtime. They walked away with a point. You still had good vibes at that point. For me, the loss to Montreal, the first one on Thursday, March 28th, was a game that there's no reason why you should lose to a team that you are that much better than. Ever since then, this team has struggled to play defense. And no matter how many goalie changes they've made, no matter how many lineup changes they have made, something has happened to this team. We'll ask Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider, next. How do the Flyers go from playoff team to life support? I'm Josh Hennig, and this is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and a 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Wake up weekday mornings with Unsportsmanlike with Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, and Michelle Small.
Adam Schefter. He joins us each and every week.
I had somebody yesterday texting Mike Trout. Hey, could the Eagles trade for Michael Parsons? Mike, go back to playing baseball. No, that's not happening. Come on, let's stop that. But the Cowboys are not trading Michael Parsons. Come on.
Did you say that Mike Trout texted you that?
Every day, football question.
Unsportsmanlike with Evan Cohen, Chris Canty, and Michelle Smallman on 97.3 ESPN.
Oh, yeah, it's on at Matt Black Nissan.
You're currently stuck in a loaner lease. AJ, the trade man, can get you released. Matt Black Nissan.com. It's on at Matt Black Nissan on the Black Horse Pike. Egg Harbor Township.
I can't believe tax season is here already. But look at all this info I have to enter.
Phil's small accounting firm is growing in numbers.
Why didn't I take that typing class in high school?
A data entry specialist could really help him in a crunch.
I got blisters on my fingers.
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. You can schedule and conduct virtual interviews all from your employer dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Timmy, everybody. Great job. Next up, we have Samantha.
10 times better performance can make a big difference. Castrol Edge Motor Oil gives your engine 10 times better high-temperature performance. Castrol Edge, better oil for maximum performance.
Now through April 23rd, get a $15 gift card when you buy 5 or more quarts of Edge or Edge High Mileage Full Synthetic, only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Claim based on Sequence 3 H test versus API SP test limits.
Presenting Again Fling's love story. Dear love of my life, we were on the 12B bus this morning when I caught a whiff. A scent so fresh, so life-changing, I had to find its source. Alas, I didn't know if you were the woman in the pink freshly washed cardigan or the retired mailman next to me, but I knew one of you was my soulmate. Ah. The scent of Gain Flings. Try Gain Flings with OxyBoost and Febreze.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today? Brakes? We can save you 15% on that. We have OE quality Duralast brake pads and rotors in stock, ready for pickup or delivery. We also have calipers, brake fluid, tools, and anything else you'll need to do the job right. When you get Duralast pads and rotors together, you'll save 15%. It's just part of what makes us America's #1 brakes destination.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
The folks at Wendy's have a revolutionary new product for you. Introducing the new Orange Dreamsicle Frosty. It's like a time machine that takes you all the way back to now, the year 2024. It's the classic creamy, orangey flavor you remember. Dare I say, it's new-timey. It's the flavor you grew up with, just all grown up. Head over to your local Wendy's establishment and get yours while supplies last. The new Orange Dreamsicle Frosty. Here for the now, for now.
Limited time only. Participating Wendy's.
With Spring Black Friday savings at the Home Depot, you can get up to $1,000 off select laundry appliances from top brands like LG, America's most reliable line of appliances. And with convenient shopping in-store and online, you can get new appliances with smart, intuitive features any way you want. Like a new LG wash combo all-in-one that can run a full load in under 2 hours. Right now, get $1,000 off select laundry appliances with Spring Black Friday savings in-store and online at the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
With GM financing to qualify buyers excludes Corvette, excludes prior sales. It's back! Bennett Chevrolet selling new Chevys at $500 below GM supplier employee pricing. You heard right. At Bennett Chevrolet, we're not only selling new Chevys at GM employee supplier pricing. No! Bennett selling new Chevys at $500 below GM supplier employee prices. Plus, you keep all the rebates. Yes, you keep all rebates and get a new vehicle at $500 below GM supplier employee pricing. And Bennett's got available 1.9% financing, saving you even more. Looking for used? For a limited time, you'll get a minimum $10,000 for any old rusted, busted junker you can get here. That's at least 10 grand towards any pre-owned in stock. Imagine how much you'll get for a good trade. And you'll absolutely love our non-commissioned sales team because they're paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. It's Bennett Chevy's best offer ever. New Chevys at $500 below the GM supplier employee price. Plus, you keep all the rebates. Together, let's drive at Bennett Chevrolet, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
We'll check back in the text board in just a bit at 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile ad powered by First Bank. Seagal. Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN, will attempt to answer the questions that we have about the Flyers. First of all, Kevin, get the pleasantries out of the way. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So I want to start with what Jamie Drysdale said to the media earlier, okay? He basically framed it as, yeah, losing like this is embarrassing, but he referred to it as, quote, mistakes are always correctable. It's just a matter of how we respond. Kevin, are these correctable mistakes the Flyers are making, and is it as simple as how they respond?
There's kind of two parts to the answer then. Can it be corrected? Sure it can. Can it be corrected in 3 games? Absolutely not. And it's going to take more time than that. So if you're looking for the response immediately and for the rest of this season, think again. It's probably not happening. But is it correctable? Sure it is. And I think he's in a unique spot because he's one of the newest guys to the team, still an adjustment process for him as well. And he's 22 now too. He just turned 22 a few days ago. And for a guy who's as young into his career as he is and has dealt with some of the things he has, he really just needs to be on the ice. It's interesting that you kind of go back to, because I was hearing you earlier, you go back to the Buffalo game, because there was a shift during that game where for him, and there's a couple other players I would lump into this category as well, but for him specifically, I watch him play, and one of the biggest things, in addition to obviously his health, staying on the ice is one of the most critical things for him, but I have an easy offseason goal for him. Hit the gym and get some added strength because he gets pushed around a little too easily. I mean, right. and that's kind of doubles part of this adjustment process for him, because on one hand, you're adjusting to, what it takes to be an NHL player. That's one part of it. But the other part is also you were inserted into the middle of this whole picture of the way the Flyers play and the way John Tortorella has his systems lined up and everything like that. And because of that, I think he doesn't have time to recover from what he was used to up until January to now. So you now know what it takes. And that's why I think it's going to be such a critical offseason for him. And that's maybe where some of the mistakes get corrected. I think when he points to mistakes also, one of the keys is that's where a lot of this is coming from. Somebody makes a mistake, it ends up in the net. They hardly make it out of their own end zone, let alone making a mistake from the offensive zone to come back the other way. It's mistakes that are happening from the red line back, and it can be a mistake. And he probably isn't even just talking about himself in that case. He's talking about, I think, collectively, defensive coverages have been bad for the last 2 weeks. The goaltending has been in a struggle since longer than that. Go back more closer to a month now at this point and beyond, honestly. And you're dealing with forwards that are collectively going into scoring slumps. And I mean, the one thing that has remained consistent, especially from an offensive standpoint, is they take a lot of shots on goal. They have, I think, the second most shots on goal in the league, and they're creating a lot of high danger chances. That percentage is high, and they don't finish. And when you don't finish on your opportunities and you give up 15 to 20 shots a game and give up 4 or 5 goals a night, you're not going to win. So, it goes back to kind of my answer from earlier in the week about, what exactly went wrong with this whole picture? Everything. Goaltenders couldn't stop the puck. Defensemen were starting to blow coverages more and more, make mistakes that led to turnovers that lead to broken coverages, and the forwards aren't finishing. And collectively, with all 3 of those things going wrong and all kind of layers of your game going wrong, it doesn't just lead to you start losing. It leads to you start getting blown out and embarrassed.
Yeah, the Montreal game was obviously embarrassing, and so was the Columbus loss. But you mentioned the Buffalo game. To me, 2 of those goals were Fedotov's fault, and 2 of them were the defense's fault because they allowed Buffalo such a clean transition from one end to the other. And I can't get the Buffalo game out of my mind, Kevin, because I feel like, if Fedotov plays a different angle on one of those goals, or if the Flyers actually play transition defense, maybe they don't lose in Buffalo. Maybe they break the losing streak. Maybe they don't get blown out by Columbus or Montreal. But for whatever reason, it's almost like the 2 overtime games have broken them. It's like the loss to the Rangers and to the Islanders, just like it like something mentally has happened to this team.
I think in part you're right. Like, I don't feel like it was completely that way with the Ranger game per se, because more than anything, I think the Ranger game and getting a point out of that game and still losing was almost a sigh of relief that they got through. Like, that's the end of the gauntlet. You're through that, and now the schedule opens up and looks way more favorable. And I think some of that plays in mentally. It does. You start to see, you don't see the Bostons and the Floridas and the Torontos anymore. The Rangers are only on there one more time. You take a breath and you kind of relax for a second, because it's like, okay, look, we got through this. We're still holding the spot. It's all in our hands. And when things, okay, things didn't go your way in Montreal, you should be able to shrug that off. And, I think I go back to the Chicago game was really the first hint of embarrassment that got out of hand quick. And you had every reason, with the way that the Islanders game was starting to play out, you almost lost. You almost lost that really quickly too, because 2 quick goals, 18 seconds apart in the first period in that game, and it starts to resemble other games that pop up on this thing. I started to note even during the gauntlet, you had games. There was one game against Toronto, you gave up 3 goals in something like 3-4 minutes. Boston, you started the third period, gave up a ton of goals in a short period of time. You did that with the Ranger game too, and it's like, okay, the one thing that you had avoided for 65 plus games was having situations like that where it starts to snowball out of control, and you're just hanging on for dear life to try to stop the thing. That hadn't happened for most of the season. That was starting to creep up, and now you've seen that against teams that aren't that talented and that don't have that kind of level. So, you get that critical point against the Islanders, but you hold possession for the entire overtime until a turnover, and then they score, and it's game over, and you don't get the second point. And there's a little frustration that creeps in with that. And then you sit on that for a few days. And again, it's kind of becomes one of those things, and they've fallen behind a lot in games early on. Ironically enough, the article that I wrote after the gauntlet was, the biggest thing for them is finishing. You have finished the season. You have the season in front of you. There's 9 games left. You just have to finish the job. It's right in front of you. But I've watched his third periods have become a problem. You've been competitive for 2 periods, and then the third period starts to unravel a little bit. So finishing the games is going to be crucial. And then the starts got bad. They started giving up 2 goals in the first period regularly, falling behind 2-0 or 3-1. And now you're chasing again. It's very reminiscent of 2 seasons ago where you fell behind. I think it was they fell behind 2-0 32 times in an 82 game season. That can't happen. And you started to have that trend come back into play. So a lot of that type of stuff, and that's why, like, again, it's everything kind of going wrong all at once, but it's really allowing it to mentally fatigue you, because as soon as you see one go in, you start to think that they're all going to go in, the save percentage being what it is, the defensive breakdowns being what they are. You start to almost talk yourself into, well, here we go again. It's just going to fall apart, just like it did against Chicago, just like it did in Buffalo, just like it did in Columbus. And that creates big problems. It tests your mental fortitude. And for a team, this is where, out of gas is not an excuse, not at this time of year, but it can be a reason. And I think that that's a big part of the reasoning, because when you look at how they've won so many games leading up to this point, it's empty the tank to get it done. They can only play at one speed. It's got to be all in, full bore, transition offense, aggressive defense, clog the neutral zone up to create turnovers. You're playing at breakneck speed for so much of it, because it was the only way you could keep up with the talent disparity. And when you can't match that level of intensity now, and other teams are ramping it up in the process as well, whether they're in or not, when you can't match that, you just get steamrolled. And they've been steamrolled now in 2 straight games for sure. The Buffalo game was a little bit more of a goalie situation. They just couldn't score on a guy. You get beat that way. The Chicago game, you got steamrolled because it got out of hand quick. It's that exact kind of scenario. So that's kind of, it all plays into it. And what you're trying, that's kind of also goes back to the first question with Drysdale. That's where you're looking for, what can we do to even stop this to end on a positive note? What you've seen, because you brought up Tortorella's response as well to this, and Tortorella was a totally different person after the Islander game than he seems to have been lately. The Islander game, it was soft and they don't have it in them. We're finding stuff out about guys. And now I think now you've gotten to the stage of acceptance. It's not going to happen this year. It wasn't expected to happen this year. And you tried, because you tried to push that button that, we're here. let's embrace that we're here and finish this thing off because we're here. And it didn't work. And you don't have the talent level to get there. It's part of the process. It's interesting that you compare it to you're comparing it to the Eagles a little bit. And I kind of think it's a bridge. Right now it's in the middle of a bridge between the Sixers and the Eagles. You're still in the process. So the process needs to be kind of embraced here. It wasn't as simple as here comes Danny Briere and Keith Jones and okay, process is over. 1 year of new era, and it is a new era. But it's not to the level of collapse that the Eagles had where the talent level and the expectations are so sky high that this is incredibly disappointing. It's, and I wrote about it yesterday that kind of, was it all worth it? Yeah. You know why it was worth it? Because you got an answer to some questions here. And some of the answers you don't have right now and you won't have until next season starts. You're not going to know whether or not Sam Harrison's a legitimate number one that can go for you now until, can he be in certain games? Absolutely. Can he be for a whole season? Gets an incomplete on the report card because we don't really know. He got thrown into weird circumstances. It wasn't meant to be this many starts in a row and to be played. He's out there playing like he's Marty Brodeur at this point with the amount of games he's getting, and he's not. So, and you really don't know anything about Fedotov at this point. So again, you have to kind of give it time. It's an incomplete. You'll get some answers, but what you do know immediately is you're not as close as you thought you were, even though you were going to potentially make the playoffs this year with the way things were shaking out. You're seeing now you're not as close as you thought you were, and that there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's what's going to set the stage for the offseason.
All right. There's a lot you said there that I want to get to. Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com. Flyers versus the Rangers tonight, coverage here on 97.3 ESPN starting at 7 p.m. All right. So I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about how the team a couple of years ago, the team was a 13-game losing streak season, and obviously it's a very different team, interim coach Mike Yeo back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Mike Yeo, right? If I'm remembering correctly. Not Tortorella is the point. Different administration running the team, different roster, different personality. So when you look back on that, because the fan out there probably heard you say that, and they're gonna be like, "Oh no, Kevin, please don't compare it to that fiasco," right? But try to maybe give a little context there, because I think on the surface, people are gonna say, "Well, if you're comparing it to that team, then you just need to blow it all up."
Right. And to me, it's not an apples to apples comparison here. There's differences with this team from the top down. The one thing I will say that to me feels solid at this point is you have way better ownership representation that is in constant communication with the fan base. Dan Hilferty's there all the time. We never saw Dave Scott. So you've got a big change there. I think you've also got, with Keith Jones, you've got, again, kind of this liaison between the very top of this operation and Danny Briere's side of it, where it's like he's also just as involved with that fan side and being kind of a representative, but also having input on what all goes into putting this whole operation together. I think you're really sound with the Hilferty ownership representation and the Jones-Briere combination at the top of this thing. And I think you've seen how John Tortorella deserves credit and blame. It's both. He deserves both sides of the equation. Credit for getting them this far and putting them in a position where the playoffs were even a possibility. Nobody had that on the bingo card this year. And then yet, the way that it ends, he's going to get some blame for it. And some of his decisions, not even recently, but going back pretty far, are going to play a factor in this because it's the style of play that they had to employ to even be in that position, to how they win games. It's sometimes the constant, he admitted didn't have trust in some of the backups once Carter Hart was gone. So that's why Sam Harrison played as much as he did. And the tank's empty there. And, same thing went for his defenseman. He mentioned Sanheim and York and how playing them a bunch has drained them. And that kind of leaves everybody else to figure it out. And they may not be they're again, playing over their heads, not playing the minutes that they would typically play in a perfect situation. So all of it factors in. I also go back to the constant deployment of 11-7 that they had throughout the course of the season. That drains your forwards a lot. So it all kind of cause and effect with that type of stuff. But I don't compare the two teams that we're looking at here because it just feels like there's been so much more progress with it. I feel like you can see things. And the one thing I will compare, I think that kind of makes me make even that comparison is, first of all, the recent games look like games from that era. And that would be a fear of mine. It would be a fear for next season that you hope you don't get off to a start or have this continue into a new season where it's like, okay, if you emptied the tanks this year and that's really the reason why this all happened, then that's the reason why it all happened. And you can answer that question affirmatively if you start next season resembling the team that played the first 70 games of this one. That happens, I think a lot of nerves are calmed. But what if it doesn't? And what happens, what questions come out as a result of that? That's where I've wondered about two possibilities going into next season already with this, which is one, that level of play creeping back up, and two, if it does, what kind of cards does John Tortorella play? What we saw for the last 3 weeks is what John Tortorella has done in previous stops when a team is in the playoff race and you can feel it slipping a little bit. Okay, this is me pushing the buttons, trying to figure out how can I motivate, what lineup decisions can I make, what can I do to change the course of this thing, and what happens if you have to do that in October and November? It's a different story when you're doing it in March and April and trying to salvage your season for the playoffs. It's another when you're saying, let's get this thing back on the rails in October and November, because if it doesn't, then what happens now? That's when I think the conversation's about, because I know the constant phrase that's out there right now. They quit on him. He's lost the room. It's out there a lot. I don't think that's completely the case right now. I think that that's more the case if you see it carry over to next year. That's what happened with Alain Vigneault. It carried over. It was 1 year, oh, this isn't good. It sounds like there might be some discrepancies with the players to the coach in that situation. If it carries over, then you've got problems. But I don't sense that right now. So those are my two big kind of questions with, like, how does this carry over? But I do think that it also lends to another thing I've kind of sensed just in general from specifically the last two games, is this sense of trust issues from the fan base, because it just feels so much like everything that we've gone through for a decade now. It just feels like, oh, it's, they're going to finish in the middle of the pack again. They're going to miss the playoffs. They're not good enough to make it, not bad enough to be the lottery team. They're stuck in the middle of this now rebuild. How do they get the talent that they need? Is it the coach? Is it the players? If it's the players, blow it all up. If it's the coach, then change the coach. We've been playing the same thing. We've been playing those cards and mentioning those possibilities for 10 years now. In my 10 years covering the team, I've gone through 6 coaches that I've had to communicate with. It can't always be the coach, and you can't just replace an entire roster of players overnight. They started that last season. There's some that were gone, and there surely will be more coming this offseason. But it's really about the carryover. It's about what we see going into next season. And if you see guys continue to take a dip in production or in the way they play, and if you see the response not be good enough. They responded so many times this season that I find it hard to believe that they just dropped off a cliff just because they don't like the coach or something like that. Then why would you respond in January and February, and then all of a sudden March comes and now that decision happens? If there's more to it, I'm sure we'll find out about it, but I don't get that sense right now.
The other comment you made in the previous lengthy statement that you made was, I'm not fully sure how to quantify. You basically had a monologue in the middle of a radio show. I'm not fully sure how to quantify it. Good for you. I just kept letting you roll there, but
yeah,
I could have interrupted you a couple times there. But you mentioned the process with the Sixers, and
right.
The perspective, that's a very polarizing statement to make, because on one hand, people would say that's great, they're working towards something, and on the other hand, people are going to say, oh my gosh, is this team ever going to make the postseason? So, what part of the process are you referring to? Is it the fact that this team still has changes to make to get to their destination? Is it the fact that there are still young guys on the way for this team? Is it the fact that, for example, Brett Brown survived the process and then he was fired? Is John Tortorella the guy to get you through, or is he the destination coach? Like, there's so much to go with when you call what the Flyers are doing, because it really isn't a process. It's more like a reconstruction while the business is still open process.
Right. And I think the stage of to me, the comparison with the process, kind of comparing the process, is that it's a multi-year thing, that it's not going to happen overnight. And there's an element of it that the Flyers didn't have for years that the Sixers had for a long time, which was admitting such. The Flyers didn't admit it for so many years. So you're only in year one of admitting where you are. And then, okay, sometimes you might get close toward, eventually toward the end of the process as well with the Sixers, they had to start getting, as many bad seasons as they had to start getting closer to something. They weren't finishing with 10 wins completely all the time. You get some progress there and you start to get the sense that what's the next step? Go out and bring stuff in. You've got foundational pieces in place. Now I got to supplement that, and I don't need to do it through drafting guys and doing it through losing seasons. It's, and that doesn't mean the Flyers have to do it entirely through losing seasons either. They almost had what would be considered a winning season in making the playoffs. They almost had that this year. And if they were to do that next year, I don't consider that, going against the rebuild process. Teams do this all the time where at some point in time, you got to place some trust in your general man. This is where the trust issues come in, that, the fan base has been failed by previous general managers and regimes and things like that. And that leads to the idea that nobody who, if your title is Flyers general manager, you don't know how to draft because every prospect doesn't pan out the way that others do and things of that nature. But that's what the whole point of having a new guy in here. That's what, Danny Briere comes in his first offseason. He's doing what he can. He's getting out some of the dead weight. He certainly has put on, to me anyway, he's put on a masterclass of how to at least handle unusual situations and keep things under wraps. Maybe the Drysdale Cutter Gauthier thing doesn't turn out to be more favorable for the Flyers than it does for the team that ends up with Cutter Gauthier for the majority of his career, whether that's Anaheim or somebody else. But at least to keep it under wraps, to get something and to get somebody who's younger that you have time to play with in the process too, is part of the equation. So that, to me, that's what it is to me. The process is that it's a multi-year thing that you just have to go through it. The Tortorella angle of that you brought up, he's not the destination guy, because I just don't think that he's going to want to be when the time comes, depending on how long it takes. I mean, if it were to happen in another 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, then sure, maybe he is the destination guy. But he's 65 years old, and there's, I've never once believed, and I'm not saying that this means it's not out there as a possibility eventually, but I've never once believed that he was leaving the bench this season or after this season, before next season, to go into a management position. I didn't think it was going to happen that soon. Is it possible that he wants to do that down the road? I believe that, because I believe that going back to how he finished last season, he was going to watch from upstairs. He didn't coach the last few games from the bench last year. He went up and watched with the general manager instead. So that leads me to think that he eventually wants to be in those conversations and wants that role. But for now, I don't see how that's where they would want him, to be honest. I don't think right now you want him to motivate guys to be at their best. For as many players out there, and this is kind of just how John Tortorella is, for as many players that say, I couldn't stand him, I don't think he's a good coach and all that type of stuff, there's players out there that go, he was the best thing for my career because he got me to a different level I didn't know I had, and the rest of my career went great because of it. That's what you're trying to do with some of these young guys right now. And that's part of the equation, is figuring out who can kind of handle some of that. And again, there's a caveat there. If some of the cards he's playing eventually start to lose their abilities, that's when you have to evaluate everything in that picture. And I said it the other day on the Sports Bash too, right before the Montreal game happened. When something like this happens, everybody has a role in it. So nobody comes away from this unscathed. That's why Tortorella is going to take some of the blame for how he maybe handled lineup decisions or what cards he played to the public when he's addressing the media about it and that type of thing. But Danny Briere gets responsibility too, and possibly responsibility for the way this ends, for doing the right thing, which was trading Sean Walker potentially. That comes into it as well. So it doesn't matter though. What Briere's responsibility is in this is, you've got more work to do because it's a process. So it's now on you whenever this is over, whether that's officially tonight or whether that's officially in 2 days or however it's going to go. Whenever it's officially over, you're going to have to regroup to what's the next steps. How does this thing get better? Because the real dangerous thing, and you're not going to, and again, this is one of those questions you're not going to have the answer to until next season. But the dangerous thing is, don't regress. If there's a regression, then you've got really big problems on your hands. But if this was just the result of not being able to sustain with the talent level, with the style you play, then at least there's hope that you've got some pieces in the right place. I mentioned earlier with you that Drysdale's biggest thing next season in the offseason is hit the gym, get some extra strength added. That's exactly what made Tyson Forrester to me look like a player. And I go, that's a guy who I want to have around for the long haul. And I know that answer after this year, and he's not even a question in my mind. But there's other guys who are in the same position that you sit there and you go, you got some work to do. And if you're going to be a part of the equation beyond just next season or whatever, you've got to show that you can be a part of it. And that's where some of the questions get answered down the road.
He's our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso. Check out all of his coverage at 97.3 ESPN.com at Kevin_Durso on the Twitter X platform. And they join me right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers Rangers tonight at 7 p.m. Kevin, good stuff today.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Of course, you also hear the Flyers game on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app as well on 97.3 ESPN FM. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City bringing you the Flyers games on the app and on the radio. Flyers tonight at 7 p.m. and then Flyers versus Devils Saturday at 5 p.m. Both games on the radio and on the app right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up, we'll wrap up the show on the other side. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on a Thursday night.
It's Flyers Ranger tonight on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Listen as Tim Saunders and Todd Fedor bring you all the exciting play-by-play action.
Great glove save by Sam Harrison. He takes that out of the top corner. Harrison's biggest save of the game.
Coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's Flyers hockey all season long on South Jersey's radio home for Philadelphia Flyers hockey.
Took the shot. He scores.
97.3 ESPN.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, call SelectQuote at 1-800-457-6060. That's 1-800-457-6060. Or go to SelectQuote.com. 1-800-457-6060. That's 1-800-457-6060.
SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Full details on example policies at selectquote.com/commercials.
Business. It's all the things that keep this world turning. And behind every one of these companies is a partner helping to keep it all moving. It's why the local flower shop and your favorite pizza joint, the startup and the stadium, hospitals and hotels, banks and restaurants nationwide all choose the advanced network, cybersecurity solutions, and round-the-clock trusted partnership from Comcast Business, the company that powers more businesses than anyone else. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
See why Comcast Business powers more small businesses than anyone else. Get started with fast speeds and advanced security for $49.99 a month for 12 months with a 1-year contract. Plus, ask how to get up to an $800 prepaid card with a qualifying gig bundle. Don't wait. Call 1-800-501-6000 or go online to ComcastBusiness.com to switch today. Ends 5/6/24. Restrictions apply. New customers only with 50 megabits per second internet and security edge. EcoBill and autopay required. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After 12 months, regular rates apply.
My wife and I we ended up mildly sick for a few months, and the nasal congestion was probably the worst part. I had like a post-nasal drip, just super congested all the time. We were taking everything we possibly could, but nothing really worked.
Kyrie was miserable until a friend recommended Navage. Navage offers immediate drug-free congestion relief, flushing your nasal passages with refreshing saline and sucking out mucus, germs, and other airborne irritants. Don't live in misery this cold season. Use Navage so you can breathe easier, sleep better, and feel your best right away.
The biggest thing Navage has done has completely cleaned out my nasal passages. It was from the first use. I was able to just clear out anything that was stopping me from breathing correctly. Navage helps me clear the way, literally clear the way for me to operate better in the rest of my life.
Experience the Navage difference yourself. Navage is available at Navage.com or at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid. Navage, AGE.
I'm a waitress, so I know the difference between regular shoes and Skechers slip-resistant work shoes. Skechers slip-resistant work shoes make my job go like this. Here's your pasta primavera.
Thanks.
While regular shoes make my job go like this. Here's your pasta prima. Whoa! And that difference is why I wear Skechers slip-resistant work shoes to keep me safe on my feet. Plus, they're easy to clean and have Skechers exclusive air-cooled memory foam for comfort throughout my shift. Get America's #1 selling work shoe at Skechers.com, a Skechers store near you, or wherever work shoes are sold.
It's buyback March at Matt Blatt Nissan. So bring any trade because AJ the Trade Man wants to buy your vehicle today. AJ pays $500 more than CarMax, so you get more dough for your ride. Brand new Sentra for just $199 per month lease with 0 security deposit. And only Matt Blatt Nissan has a 4-day love it or leave it return policy.
Oh yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
Or drive home with 0 down and 0 interest for 72 months. Plus, current Nissan owners get $1,000 owner loyalty cash back on every clearly marked new Nissan in stock. Have a job clearing $450 per week? We want to approve you today. And AJ wants your trade, but only at Matt Blatt Nissan.com. Rate qualifications exist with approved credits. $1,389 per thousand finance. Not all will qualify. Go to MattBlattNissan.com for complete details or call 844-917-4758. Price includes all costs to be paid by consumer except for licensing, registration, and taxes. Sentra VIN RY 201059. Lease selling price $24,579. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike. Egg Harbor Township.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and on the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Before we get to the sounder, for your next opportunity to qualify for the Eagles draft party, the sounder will go off in about 2 to 3 minutes from now. Get some text here, 609-403-0973. Your DMs into the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Joey D. Inventner chimes in. It says, how disappointed are you about the Flyers imploding? For you, was it worse than the Eagles? That's from Joey D. Inventner. Joey, it wasn't worse than the Eagles. The Flyers imploding is pretty up there and very disappointing situations. I think that if I had to rank them, I would say Sixers losing the series to the Hawks, then Eagles implosion last season, and then the Flyers this year. Because to me, they were winning games with a style of hockey that I thought was maintainable. I thought that they could maintain what they were doing because half of their games were won basically just on hustle and grit and energy and effort. They weren't winning because they were the better hockey team. You heard Kevin Durso say, this team is up there among the league leaders in shots taken. So they're still generating offensive chances. But everyone went into a slump. The transition defense has been horrible at times. And the goaltending has been incredibly disappointing. So it's definitely up there, but it's not worse than the Eagles. And it's not worse than the Sixers losing to the Hawks in the postseason. George at Summers Point chimes and says, hey, Josh, at this point in the Philly season, who is your go-to closer? Is it Hoffman? I'd like to hear your opinion on this matter, George at Summers Point. It's not Hoffman. It's absolutely not Hoffman. The fact this organization keeps running Hoffman out there like he is the answer at the back end of the game suggests to me that either this organization is trying to talk themselves out of the Hoffman deal or they just don't trust Alvarado. I mean, that's how I look at it. They either don't trust Alvarado and Soto in a situation, or they're just keeping the seat warm for Orion Kerkering. Because to me, Hoffman is not a closer. That would be like saying for the 1998 Yankees, I want Jeff Nelson going out there closing games for me. No, I don't at all. All right, you heard the sound. It's time for callers number 6 and 7. Your opportunity to qualify for the Eagles draft party contest. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. You qualify. You are in for the Eagles draft party. We have an opportunity for a Philly sports trip, grand trip to the Eagles versus the Ravens. But you must be caller 6 and 7 to qualify at 609-573-3776. And if you qualify, you are in for the contest. But if you're in for the contest, you must be present at Top Golf at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City the day of the draft, April 25th, where Mike Gill and Sports Bash broadcast live from 2 to 6 p.m. So caller 6 and 7. Good luck. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. Flyers hockey next on 97.3 ESPN.
You have the choice. Whether it's going out to dinner or ordering takeout at a local restaurant or buying that new outfit from a local boutique, those choices help to put money back into your community. Town Square Media South Jersey proudly puts a spotlight on local businesses.
First Bank of Sea Isle City, Cape May County's community bank. Philly Marble and the Philly Marble and Tile Outlet, Philadelphia Avenue and Route 30 in Egg Harbor City. Visit phillymarble.com. Jenkins Plumbing and Heating. Call Jenkins for heating and air conditioning installation, service and maintenance, plumbing, or drain cleaning service. 609-641-6440 or jenkinsplumbingandheating.com. The Nizam's Authentic Indian Cuisine. They are waiting to serve you. Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelylback.com.